need help solving a mystery. Ever since I was a kid, anytime they were speaking about slavery or anything like that, I always wondered, where the fuck were the Hispanics at? Which bathroom did we use? Like, why is there never anything about Hispanic people during slave times? Like, I just can't, like, I know I'm not, like, white enough, but I'm not quite black enough either. So, like, where did I land on the spectrum? Because every history teacher I've ever asked, or anyone that's just like a history buff, or if a conversation is ever brought up about slavery, and I ask the question, where were Hispanics? No one ever has the fucking answer. And it has boggled my mind for so long, still to this day, 2025, I don't know the fucking answer. And I need someone to just tell me where we belonged. If you know, please let me know.
Now that was a bold question, but also a loaded one. Because while it sounds like Latinos were silent or absent during that time, the truth is far more complicated and honestly much deeper than most people realize. And what's even more interesting, a lot of people responded to her, and their response incredibly educative and full of important context many people don't even talk about.
Why is there never anything about Hispanic people during slave time? I'm not like white enough, but I'm not quite black enough either. So, like, where did I land on the spectrum?
Hello, dear. Let's get into your history as a Hispanic person, since you wanted to know why Hispanics weren't included in history. The reason why you never saw signs that said Hispanics here, drink at this fountain, go to this bathroom, is because the word was not made up yet. It wasn't until later that Hispanics came into existence. But first, you need to realize that that's a prisoner of war term. These terms were used to categorize prisoners of war. Many of us don't realize that we are prisoners of war, and the titles that those who have us as prisoners of war gave us, we wear proudly like a badge. But it's basically for discriminatory practices and to segregate us, because it's just another derogatory term to say that you have so-called black blood in you. And it's all of these terms right here. All of these people are prisoners of war. And this is how they labeled us. So if you find yourself under any of these categories, you are a prisoner of war. And this is your prisoner of war title given to you by the colonizers, the enslavers, and those who have held us as prisoners of war. Let's first delve into the term Latino and where it came from. It came from the word Latino Americo, and so they called it Latino for short. There was a widespread usage of the term Hispanic that began around the 1970s because they wanted to be counted in as their own people. Let me explain. They were at one time counted as being white, or wherever the census was taken. And so in order to have their own separate identity, this is where the term Hispanic came in. It was courtesy of the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and MALDEF for short. Let's go deeper into your history, though. Let's take a look at the original people that were in South America and also in the Caribbean, in the different places where the Hispanics are today. Since Mexico is below the U.S., let's start there with Mexico, the Arawaks, and the Caribs, which are right below the United States. And as you can clearly see, the people who call themselves West Indian, the Arawaks were in the north and the Caribs were in the south. Take a look at the description of the Caribs. It says that they were tawny and they were dark brown in complexion. And the Arawaks, they were reddish brown. So they were all dark-skinned people, as you can see. And it also says the Mexican Indians. Now, notice they're all considered to be Indians, okay? It doesn't say Africans. It says Indians. And it says that they were a swarthy color and they were copper colored. So they were dark-skinned. The Mexicans were dark-skinned people. My skin complexion is copper colored. So they were about my skin complexion. And of course, this is prior to them being mixed with the European blood. Let's take a look at the description of the people from Peru, Brazil, Guyana, and Colombia. And again, you'll see here, the Peruvians were Indians, okay? So everyone in North and South America and the Caribbean, they were considered to be Indians. And they were copper colored as well. just like those of us on the mainland in America. We're described as the American Indians, and we're copper colored. So basically, pretty much everybody, mostly everyone in the Americas were copper colored people. And there were some variations. Some were reddish colored and some were darker, had darker hues. As you can see here, it says they were also darker copper colored. So imagine a penny that is old, not a brand new shiny penny, which would be more copper colored. And so just think of one it's old and it's been circulated for a while. So between those two complexions, this is the skin complexion of the people. If you come down to the last paragraph, it talks about the people from Brazil. And then it also talks about the Mongols. So we know that those who are called Native Americans, the Mongolians, they were actually the first ones to come to the Americas with the copper colored. The brown, dark skinned people were already here first, though. So some were mixed with the Mongols, which is why some Hispanics have a more Asian look to them. But it still says that they were brown in skin complexion and reddish brown if you read further in the second paragraph. So let's take a look at the Patagonians. And I don't know how to pronounce this, but right here, the P word and the A word. But it also says that these people who were also in the Caribbean, they were a reddish brown and darker than copper color. So these were very dark skinned people. And it says that some were reddish brown, also copper color. We have all heard of how a lot of Mexicans want to reclaim part of the Americas, but they must first understand that, yes, they did come from their ancestors, but their ancestors look like me. And I know a lot of Hispanics don't want to admit that. So what can I say? But clearly, as it states here, the Aboriginals of the upper California area, which is above Mexico, here's the description of what those people look like. It says, though there were different variations of the different tribes that were there, they all pretty much looked the same, like copper colored and darker skin. Okay. And then they said there were American Negroes that were actually dumped there, which is not the exact same people as the American Indians. Those are two completely different people. And the people around Colombia, they also match the same complexion and physical appearance of those who were in North America, the North American tribes, which are the copper colored people and brown skinned people. You asked, where do the mulattoes fit in? Again, the mulattoes came about because of the interracial rape. And all of this information is coming from this book. Hispanics came about because of the intentional crossbreeding with the slaves in order for various skin complexions to be created. Why were all these different skin complexions necessary to create? It's to keep the slaves in submission, because they further used it to pit them against each other according to their skin complexion and other differences as well. But we're focusing on skin complexion right now of the mulattoes. So in this Willie Lynch letter, it's clearly stating to pit the dark skin against the light and the light against the dark, which is why a lot of people are so brainwashed today and hate people according to the color of their skin, not really realizing that all of you are hated. But this was a tool to keep them in subjection and to keep them dependent upon the slave master and respecting the slave master, but disrespecting one another, which unfortunately still plays out today. So now we get into the preferential treatment of the mulattoes, which mestizo, same thing. It means mixed. The mixed people, the mulattoes, they receive preferential treatment. Many of them were called house N-words. So while the dark-skinned people were out in the field, the mulattoes and the fair-skinned ones were inside. Not only that, some of them were allowed to buy themselves out of slavery, and if their fathers claimed them, they were granted freedom. And by the late 18th century, many of the mulattoes that were free and other mixed-race people, they began petitioning for legal rights. I showed you all that so you can clearly see true history and how it unfolded and how Hispanic people came about. Now, if you read this book by Diego de Landa, Yucatan Before and After the Conquest, you'll see that the Spaniards came down from Spain, and many of the other groups, the Portuguese, they went to South America. Columbus did as well. They took a lot of the women as slaves. They took them as concubines. They impregnated them. The indigenous women that look like me and Hispanic people are a result of that mixture. I go into great detail about the information that's in this book in my Slave Trade Told in Reverse 4-part series that's on my page. Or you can go to my YouTube channel. It'd probably be a lot easier to find that. The 4-part series on how the slave trade was told in reverse. And I hope this helps to answer some of your questions there.
The reason why you can't find Hispanics during slavery or Jim Crow is because Hispanic wasn't a word during those times. See, the word Hispanic started being used in the 1970s. See, at that time, we were legally classified as white, and on the census, we were marked down as white. This was a problem. because they couldn't distinguish us as brown people from the white population on paper. Our funds for our communities, schools, things like that were being pushed into white neighborhoods, white schools, white communities, while removing resources and funding from brown communities. So the organization LULAC petitioned to have us separated on the census and giving us a separate category called Hispanic, meaning of Spanish-speaking origin. That way they could start tracking how brown communities were being defunded and how brown communities weren't being given resources. Later on in the late 80s and 90s, people started moving away from the term Hispanic and started going more towards the term Latino. Now, Hispanic comes from the word Hispano, which is what Spaniards on the northern side of the border were called in the United States. On the southern side of the border, those Spaniards were called Criollos, Spaniards born here in the Americas. During that time, people like me and you, who are brown presenting, were called mestizos, which is a eugenics concept, and there's really no such thing as a mixed person or a full-blooded person, because race is not biological, it's a social construct, and you can't be a half of a social construct or 3/4 of a social construct. It's not how that works. Anyway, detribalized natives, which we're indigenous people, were called mestizos under Mexican control. But then when the U.S. took control, they called us Mexicans. So where were all those brown people during slavery? They were enslaved too. See, what history fails to tell you is that indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere were mass enslaved and suffered through chattel slavery. And not only did they displace us and traffic us all over the Western Hemisphere, but they also trafficked us to Europe and to European colonies in Africa. We are also the descendants of slaves. And Jim Crow didn't only happen in the Southeast, but it also happened in the Southwest. And it happened very covertly up in the North. So yes, we had separate water fountains and separate bathrooms. We couldn't swim in the same pools as white kids. We couldn't sit in the same movie theaters, or we had to sit in the back up on the balcony. We also were forced to sit in the back of the bus and the back of trains. But that's a history that they suppress and never talk about. Because if you don't know what they're doing to indigenous people, and if you don't know that those brown people are indigenous people, they get to cover up their genocide of indigenous people. And that's how they steal our lands and our resources. Always reclassifying us as something else and always displacing us. It's how they maintain that indigenous people do not unify to come get our lands back. Imagine what it would be like if more people started waking up to their indigeneity, and how powerful that could be in more ways than one.
So before I begin this, I want y'all to go find her page. She doesn't have a stitch on this video, so I'm gonna share it with you a little bit, and then I'm gonna do my own take on it because I did research and homework because I find it very interesting, and I think you will too.
Can't find Hispanics during slavery or Jim Crow is because Hispanic wasn't a word during those times. See, the word Hispanic started being used in the 1970s. See, at that time, we were legally classified as white, and on the census.
So those of you that just look at my skin tone and think like, oh, she's just talking. No, I'm not just talking, because this means this is important to me because I have to teach my adult children about their culture and what I find. This is what we do. So have you ever wondered why we don't hear much about Hispanics during the era like slavery or Jim Crow? If you listen to her video, she explains it all in great detail. But this is just my research on it from what she's saying. And yeah, it's connecting. Like, it didn't even exist until the 1970s, the word Hispanics, right? It didn't. But before that, many of my kids' ancestors, her ancestors, were simply classified as white on paper. Before I continue, I'm going to put a picture up right after this video. What I want you to do is hold your finger on it, expand, and look at the groups of people. There's even a category for freed white people. Why is that on there? Why is that on there? So that meant, like she said, because I'm giving credit where credit is due, that's what we should do, that the resources meant that for that community, they were often redirected elsewhere, somewhere else, like white spaces, right? Totally cutting out that community, even though they were treated like other than, right? So she was saying, like, thanks to the efforts of this organization named LULAC, right? LULAC was the organization that separated the categories where they created to ensure that unique struggles from different communities were recognized. So that's where it started to be separated, right? It's a very big eye opener. They don't teach you about this. They only teach you about the white version of America and then sprinkle in a little bit of seasoning, if you get what I'm saying. But the story doesn't end there. Like, the Latino history is rich and complex. Like, it is interwoven with experience of indigenous people who were also faced with enslavement. I need to read more about that. And marginalization. Yeah. I knew a little bit, but I don't know enough to be like, oh, this is so unjust. So this is me learning and me teaching y'all what I'm learning, because it's important where y'all see where I'm coming from. If you just see me just splurt out certain things, be like, where did that come from? I'm showing you where it came from. So understanding roots of just people in general, you will have an understanding of the people. It helps reclaim stories that should be taught, identities that should be known, and should be in a rightful place of history. So imagine that power if we all knew things. I know, being in the Black community, we are forced to learn everybody's culture. We have to, because we have to stay informed. We have to know how to move in life, but not for everybody else. But I need y'all to stay curious, stay informed, and let's continue to uncover the story that shapes us all. Most of all, never forget to give credit where credit is due. Here's a little bit more of her video. Make sure you go to her page, like her page, share her information, because it's important. That's what she wants us to do. I'm doing it, so you should too.
Because they couldn't distinguish us as brown people from the white population on paper, our funds for our communities, schools, things like that, were being pushed into white neighborhoods, white schools, white communities. Well,
Go find her video.
This conversation was so heavy but absolutely necessary, because history isn't always black and white. It's layered, messy, and often manipulated. The reactions to this topic showed just how misunderstood and erased so much of our past still is. From colonization to cultural identity, people are finally speaking up, and it's about time. So if you've got more insight on this, especially about Latino and Hispanic roles during slavery, drop it in the comments. Educate us, because I'm still learning too, and so are a lot of people watching. Thank you for sticking around this far. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and hit that subscribe button for more deep, unfiltered conversation like this one. I'm Macy, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.